Hi, and thank you for clicking on this video. My name is Phil, aka Phil, and long-term viewers know that I'm quite a huge fan of retro-style cameras. And as you might already saw on the title and the thumbnail, I might have one of the most expensive retro-style cameras here in my hands. And here a huge shout out to my friends at Fotoprofi Sling. They made it possible for me to have this camera in my hands, and I'm allowed to have this camera for a few days for testing and make my first impression about this Fujifilm GFX100RF. As I mentioned before, I had this camera only for a few days and only had one time slot to do a street shoot. So yeah, nothing special regarding images. It was just my opportunity to shoot this camera on the streets. Having this on the streets, I have to say, the first impression I had, besides of the great build quality regarding the shooting experience, is definitely, I would say, somehow it felt like an introverted dream to shoot with this camera. And let me explain. There are two factors which is counting to that opinion of mine. The first thing is that this camera, based on my shooting experience with other cameras, is relatively compact. The form factor is relatively small if you compare it with an, like this Nikon ZF, a full frame camera. So size-wise, it's relatively, similar. And if you consider the medium format sensor, it's very compact. The next point why I felt quite, safe, you could say, on the streets to shoot this one is also regarding the retro design. People don't, take these kinds of cameras seriously on the streets. If you point an DSLR or full frame camera with a big lens on the streets to take street photos, that's a different thing, at least in my experience. But the size, the form factor, and the design somehow gave me the feeling of being safe on the streets and nobody's bothering me. Also, because of the size factor, the form factor, I don't think that a lot have mentioned that before. If you shoot this on the streets, it looks like, at first glance at least, like you are taking images on an Instax camera. And these cameras are very popular nowadays, and people look at these kind of cameras like a fun camera, not a serious camera. Yeah, if you look at it, it looks like an Instax on steroids X10. And the ergonomics of this camera also is quite nice without any additional accessories. And that's how I'm, felt quite, I didn't had any anxiety shooting this on the streets. The last factor, and that is, I think, for those of you who are looking at this camera, why this camera is so special also, is of course the sensor size, also the megapixel count with the sensor size of 100 megapixels. And having that fact in mind, I was quite lazy with my photography by just eyeballing and pointing the camera in roughly the direction. And in my mind, I was just saying to myself, just point it into the scene you want to capture, and then we will take care regarding framing and so on in post. And that's basically how I shot this camera on that one session. All these factors combined, it made me look at this camera like the ultimate introverted street camera somehow. So at least that's my first impression of this camera. Because of that, I had a lot of fun shooting on the streets compared to my other cameras, or even if I take a DSLR camera out, and that's the complete opposite. When I go on the streets with that kinds of camera, also film cameras, SLR cameras, I have a lot of anxiety that people might call me out, say something to me, which has happened, and nothing dangerous happens to me. But such interactions leaves marks on my mind, and it bothers me throughout the day. And compared with this one, I didn't have any kind of interaction, but also somehow it gave me the feeling of being safe. Difficult to explain, but that's my experience when I shot this camera on the streets. Of course, the way I see this camera, and of course this is only my personal opinion, and it's a quite special opinion. That's just a quick summary why I, in my opinion, see this camera. It's a very specific look on this camera, but that's the experience I made having this camera on the streets and comparing with my other cameras. It felt quite safe to shoot this. Of course, the way I shot this camera and what I just told you, it's a very lazy approach regarding photography, because I know that if you try to get it in frame, it's much harder and you learn much more about photography, composing your shot, etc, etc. If I compare it with the days where I'm just feel anxious and have some kind of fear, having this as a comparison and don't have that feeling during shooting, I can see that people do value that kind of shooting experience, and if that helps you to get the shot on the streets, so why not get such a premium camera if you have the funds? And I just wanted to give you that kind of experience from an introverted hobbyist street shooter. I thought some of you might find this interesting. About the camera itself, I think most of you have seen a lot of videos about this already. I can only confirm regarding the build quality, that's amazing. This camera, if you blindfold your eyes and just give it to someone, people might think that this is a Leica or Hasselblad. I can't tell because I never held a Hasselblad camera in my hands before, but regarding Leica, I think people wouldn't notice the difference, at least regarding the build quality, because this feels amazing in the hand. Everything feels high premium. The dials are very tactile and clicky and so on. You can feel where the prices goes into the body. And I wish that the X-T5 or at least the XT lineup would get a similar treatment regarding high build quality like this GFX. So let's see how the X-T6 will look like. Also a small comment from my end regarding the lens. It's a 28mm full frame equivalent at f4, and also here I think you have seen a lot of videos regarding different opinions and comparisons. The only thing I can say is that if you look at this camera, you should know why you get it. and what you are shooting. Because the 28mm full frame equivalent focal length on this GFX, it allows you to capture a lot of your image, and combined with the 100 megapixels, again, you can here just select where you put your focus in regarding composition. And I think combined with an f4, that was the focus of Fujifilm, allows it to have it in that small compact form factor. These trade-offs you should know and be aware of if you want to purchase this camera. f4 sounds like not enough light coming into the lens, but again, that's highly depending on how, where you are coming from. I shoot also a lot of film, so the highest film I shoot is black and white at ISO 1600. So everything about that is already high for me. Combining that, of course, with an appropriate lens, at some point you hit the ceiling. But of course, if you are comparing it with one of the latest Sony cameras where the ISO value is very high, and you can also combine it with a 2.8 glass or faster, you might look at this combination and say that it's too slow regarding low light. Here again, I think if you have the possibility, try to get your hands on one. If you have the opportunity, try to shoot some low light images, look at the images at home, and then decide if the camera is something for you or not. I also did a quick comparison with the Leica Q here. The Leica Q lineup, the original Q lineup, do also have a 28mm focal length at an aperture of 1.7. And if you compare that side by side, of course, the 1.7 of full frame does give you more background separation. But here again, you should know why you are purchasing or looking at this camera. If you do lust for more bokeh or that environmental pop with an 1.7 lens, for example, of the Leica Q lineup, I think this one is more suitable for you. As you see here in the comparison images, you can see a difference between the f4 on medium format is the separation, I think, about 2.8 on full frame if you translate it, and compared to 1.7 on the Q, of course, there's a difference. I can't emphasize this enough. Know your use case, because at 1 meter, the first image is here, at 1 meter, you can see that kind of separation or difference in the background blur. But in the second image here at 2 meters, it's already quite hard to see. And if you use this here for travel, landscape, and overall street photography, I think this one is quite brilliant. But of course, the Leica Q with the latest iteration of the Q3 with 60 megapixel is also a very nice competitor and alternative choice here. Here also, again, a little bit quick of size comparison here with the Leica Q. And this is I think the reason why Fujifilm chose the f4 lens is to keep this form factor regarding the lens smaller compared to a Leica Q. Because that has been a con for a lot of Leica Q users or potential buyers, that people have said that the lens on the Leica Q sticks out too much. I think, or I assume, that Fujifilm has heard that and wanted to keep the size slimmer compared to the Q, which they are able to do if you are not using the lens hood. Only in that case, they are the GFX100RF is slimmer. And also next to the Nikon ZF, it's quite, if you consider the medium format sensor, it's relatively compact. And here, just for funsies, this is the OM3 micro four thirds sensor. It's a fraction of the GFX lens. But since I have the cameras here, why not hold them next to another? Some people have also mentioned that because of the taller size, I have seen or saw some cons or negative thoughts about that. But in my opinion, this taller form factor solves a lot of ergonomic issues if I look at retro style cameras. And that's specifically you are able to rest your thumb here quite nicely. And that's also one of the factors why I felt quite safe and secure while shooting this camera on the streets, that I had the feeling that the camera doesn't slip out my hand, and I was able to hold it comfortably this way, resting my thumb on this part of the body. So that design decision helps definitely. Last thought I have for you is, of course, the comparison, not a direct comparison, but thoughts between the GFX100RF and the Leica Q3. And since I have owned the Q3 28mm version in the past, after shooting this camera, which camera would I personally buy again, you could say? And I have to say, although I had a lot of fun shooting this camera, and in my eyes, this is somehow an introverted dream camera. If I had to choose between the GFX or the Q3, 28 or 43, it doesn't matter. Today, I would choose one of the Leica Q cameras. And let me explain why. The beauty of shooting this at 100 megapixels and having not to worry about your framing or going too close to people to get the frame, you have a different pain in post-production. And that's because of the 100 megapixels files you get out of this camera. Opening them, uploading them to Lightroom Mobile or anything like that, it takes a lot of time to process these cameras. Even in Lightroom Classic, it takes a while to get this process. Although my MacBook is a bit old, but it's not outdated in my opinion. It still have an M2 processor. Yeah, if you try to process and edit multiple images, the workflow, if you compare it with smaller files, you do notice the difference in processing time, etc. Besides that, of course, the file management is also quite a nightmare if you don't have enough space, or you have to consider that. Having shot one images on this camera makes an 250 megabytes raw file, so that's also a lot. And yeah, just going through the images just for this video, I didn't like the slowed down process, to be honest. But that's also something to keep in mind. I do this only for hobbyist purposes. If I was in a professional setup and have to rely on higher megapixel count or more details for product shots or something like that, that would be, I think, a total different conversation. But since I'm just a hobbyist, I think, in my opinion, one of the Leica Q cameras, Q2, Q3, if you need the higher megapixels, are more than enough to, go on the streets and crop, if that's the way you shoot on the streets to get your shot. Nevertheless, this camera is such a beauty, and if money wasn't an issue, I would keep this camera for my lazy street photography days. But after using it and able to have my hands on this camera, I can at least say that this camera is not for me, at least for my current situation of life and photography, because I shoot a lot of family documentation, and here I do want to isolate my object more with portrait shots, and therefore different cameras with different apertures, focal lengths, and so on are suited more for that kind of use cases. If you want to get this camera, this specific one, and you are in Germany, and go visit Fotoprofi. I will leave you a link down in the description. This camera is an open boxed one, and therefore you can see the price is quite discounted, so check it out if you're interested. Quick additional information: if you're really serious about purchasing this specific camera from Fotoprofi, just give them a call, as I mentioned, if you're in Germany, and tell them you saw my video on this one. Tell them that I sent you, and you might get a small discount on this specific GFX camera. And since the GFX100RF is quite high in demand, I assume that this will also be sold quite quickly. So if you want to purchase this, reminder, know your use case. Otherwise, I think you will sell it again. If you know why you are getting this camera, just link in the description. And huge thanks again to Fotoprofi Sling to give me the opportunity to shoot this camera. And if you made it until this point, thank you very much for your time watching. You're the one who deserves a like for that. And if you're curious where I got the OM3, just click on this video.